Hi guys, welcome back to running a freelance design business. This is lesson 19, contracts. My name is Ben Gribbin. In this lesson, we are going to help you write up contracts. We're going to help you understand the importance of working with them, and we're going to consider specifics that should be included into a design contract. So, what is a contract if you're unsure, if you've never signed one, which is very difficult to believe? A contract is a sheet of legal paper that has been written up with specific clauses and conditions for a certain agreement. That's all they are, very simply put. So very likely you will have signed one. It's to help avoid everybody getting into legal ramifications, and it's just laying out who's responsible for what should be carried out, when a project can be viewed as successful. It also helps out should the project or the client or you end up making a mistake or just something in general goes wrong. Ideally, a contract is in writing. However, you can have things like verbal agreements, which in some countries can be legally binding if there's been a note made of them. But really, these are just kind of gentlemen's agreements. They're not fully legal, and it's a bit disputable as to who said what. And really, you just want to make sure you've got something recorded so you don't get into a situation where it's your word against your clients or any sort of problems like that. Get something written down, get it proofed, get it signed by all parties involved, and then nobody can be disagreeing with it. But what do you actually include in a contract then? Well, contracts are quite long, contracts can be quite boring, but you don't need to be a lawyer to create a contract, and it doesn't need to be all legally boring and full of fuddy-duddy kind of grammar. It can be plain English, very simple, just outlining what a project will do, when your clients should expect to be paying for it, when it should be delivered, what form and how it will be delivered, and we're going to look at the specifics of a contract now. So the first thing you want to do is just lay out the general sort of project itself. Put the details of who you are, who your client is, list company names and addresses, that sort of stuff, and those present at the meeting or who you'll be dealing with. Just get all that written out in the first few paragraphs. Then write down about the project itself. So what's going to be carried out, who is going to be making it, who you're going to be working with, who's going to own the project itself. Then you want to write down things like changes and revisions. How many changes are you going to allow your clients to make? Will they be allowed any? Will they be allowed up to a certain few number of hours or number of revisions? That kind of stuff is going to be important, because if you have too many revision requests, then it'll throw your pricing out and you'll end up losing money, especially if you're doing fixed pricing. So how many changes will your client be able to make before you then have to charge them extra hours or just extra a set number of a set value for those changes to be made? Turnaround times. What kind of turnaround time should a client be expecting? Is the project going to be split up into 4 sections? So maybe concepts, revised concepts, final versions, delivery, that sort of thing. Is there another stage in there like coding if it's a website, or printing? Final delivery is literally the printed documents, so write those things down. Also make a note of when clients should be paying, so maybe if you're doing a staged pricing, maybe a client should pay you after the first section, the second section, third section, and that gives you great cash flow. So make all notes of that in the contract. Tell your client what to actually expect. So if you've got a website, are you just going to send them the PSD files, or can they expect a fully coded website? If you're printing out flyers, brochures, identity, stationery, are you providing all the stationery? Are you arranging for the pens to be printed? Are you going to have t-shirts made up, or are you literally just providing the raw source files from Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop to be used by them? You need to make all that very, very clear so that there's no disappointment. What can the client expect in terms of who owns the project? So some companies or design companies will work on the process of them hiring out a design and the client sometimes paying a continual fee to be able to even use it, whereas a lot or most people will simply just, for the value you are given, create something for the client which is theirs to keep. Other people might retain some sort of ownership. Maybe they only allow the certain design to be used once, they don't want it to be reused by another company, that sort of thing. So you want to think about the design in the future. How will it be used? Who owns what? When the project is finished, where is it going to be sent? How is it going to be delivered to the client? That sort of stuff needs to be written down and made a note of. The approval process, you want to find out at least, even if you don't put this in the contract, which you should be doing, who's going to approve the work, who's got the final say, who can and can't be making changes, so you're not ending up dealing with the sort of a sales team that thinks they want to make some input into the thing or the design gig when they don't actually have any reason to do so. Get things like contacts, emails, addresses, printed copies, meetings, that sort of stuff, all nailed out. So think about those, make notes of them in the contract. So for example, who will you be dealing with? Will you be available for meetings? Because maybe you don't want to be available for meetings, or you prefer to work over the phone. Find out beforehand if the project can be used as a design reference for your portfolio, in a magazine, that sort of stuff. Will the client be happy to give you a quote, or will they allow you to use them as a case study on your portfolio? Is the client going to be happy with that, or are they going to make you sign an NDA? That's something you should think about. Speaking of NDAs, confidentiality. You may well be given an NDA by your client, but it'd be handy to have one. You can purchase or find them on the internet for free. So find an NDA of some sort to have to hand, just in case you need to all say, okay, I agree, I will not disclose information about the project or certain areas of the design, whatever it is. Think about that. Have a section for troubleshooting. So let's say down the line, the client has your design sent off to a printers and it doesn't work. Who's responsible? Things like that. Soak testing, any errors that come up on a website further down the line, are you responsible, or is it just the client's problem to then have to sort out? Will the client get charged? When will they get charged for any issues that crop up? These are things that you need to think about now and lay out ahead of time for the client to be able to agree to and digest. Contract termination is something you want to include in there. When can the contract be terminated? What will happen if it's terminated? Does the client need to pay up in full? Do they need to give you a month's notice and some sort of notice? Do they need to pay half the project fee? Think about what will happen if you need to get out of the contract for whatever reason. What happens then? Force majeure, that sort of leads on from that. These are the sort of acts of God that can prevent us as professionals from completing a job. So let's say a fire totally burns your home office, melts your computer, destroys all of your backups, and basically leaves you without any ability to work. Chances are you won't be able to finish off a client's project and meet any of the deadlines. So just as a precaution, include that in your contract. So say, worst case scenario, if you have no office, no computer, the last thing you want is for a client to be coming back really angry because you're unable to do the work. So if that happens, tell your client what's going to occur, whether you're able to carry out your work, you have backups in place or not. And if it's all written out ahead of time, then hopefully you'll be able to sort that out more effectively. Other legal considerations you want to include: how you might handle a dispute, should it arise, third-party involvement, which party should be responsible for illegal costs that could happen potentially if any of those are incurred, who needs to pay them. And then finally, you should have your client sign it. So after all this has been written, perhaps it would be advisable to get like a solicitor or an attorney just to check it over. Don't forget the client to sign it. Simply submitting the document to your client doesn't count as an agreement, so you need your client to verbally or reply via email or physically sign it for it to be legally binding. To make matters more convenient, allow the client to return your contract via post, fax, email, whichever method they choose, because it can be a little bit of an inconvenience, or even better, do it in person. So we've covered a lot of points that you want to consider about including in your contract, which you should really have at least looked over by a legal person. So perhaps if you could write up a template, that would be ideal. Then get somebody you know or a solicitor to just check it over, make sure you haven't missed anything and there are no loopholes, which is very important. Over the years of me working with clients, I've never had the need to use a contract, like refer back to it and say, well, hang on a minute, this is what we agreed, but it's always been there just in case. So it's always something that's very important having to hand, just to answer questions, lay out what's happening. It's a great resource and it can offer you some peace of mind and protection as well. So then, templates, we've mentioned them. Where can you even look for these? Well, there's two great sources. There's this one, it's on 24ways.org, and it is the contract killer. It's basically just a very nice, simple English sort of contract you can use. Obviously, you want to repurpose it for your own projects and clients, so have a look over that, as well as an update to that, which is on stuffandnonsense.co.uk, we'll include the link below. And that is the contract killer, the next hit. And that's just an update, a little bit of the very simple contract there, something you want to check out and you'll be able to use in your own projects, no doubt. So in this lesson, we've looked at contracts. We've considered what you should include in them, why you should use them, and why they are important. And your task for the lesson is to go out, perhaps use those 2 templates we've mentioned, or even just write up your own very simple contract that you can use in future design projects. Next time on Running a Freelance Design Business, we'll be looking at invoicing. Thanks for watching.